Welcome back my YouTube channel, Leap Inspire. The rain that night in Lagos did not feel normal. It felt heavy, like the sky itself was mourning. Tunde stood outside the small apartment, his body trembling, his clothes soaked, his fingers numb from cold and pain, but none of that hurt as much as what was happening inside that house. Two black garbage bags sat beside him on the wet ground, filled with everything he owned, his clothes, his memories, his life. He knocked on the door softly at first, then harder, his voice breaking as he called, "Remy, please, just open the door." But the only response he got was silence, followed by a cold voice from behind the curtain, a voice he once called home. "Thank you for the help, Tunde, but I have a better life now. Go away." Those words didn't just enter his ears, they sank deep into his soul and shattered something that could never be repaired. He stood there for a long time, hoping maybe she would change her mind, maybe she would remember who he was, what they had been, but the door never opened. And slowly, painfully, he picked up those bags and walked away into the rain, into the darkness, into a future he never imagined. With every step he took, it felt like he was leaving behind not just a house, but a version of himself that had once believed love was enough to survive anything. 4 years earlier, life was simple, pure, and full of dreams. In a small village near Ibadan, where the roads were dusty and the nights were filled with the sound of crickets and distant drums, Tunde and Remy were just two young souls in love, sitting under the warm African sky, dreaming of a better tomorrow. They didn't have money, they didn't have luxury, but they had something far more powerful. They had each other. Tunde would look at Remy with pride and say, "One day you will become a great nurse, and I will stand beside you and smile." And Remy would laugh softly, resting her head on his shoulder, believing every word as if it was already written in destiny. Sometimes they would talk about building a small house back in their village, with a mango tree in the yard and children running around barefoot, and those simple dreams felt bigger than any luxury in the world. When the opportunity came for her to study abroad, it felt like a blessing sent from heaven. But blessings often come with sacrifices, and Tunde was ready to give everything without asking for anything in return, because in his heart, her success was his success. London was cold, cruel, and unforgiving, nothing like the warmth of home. But while Remy sat in classrooms chasing her dreams, Tunde was out in the streets, riding a bicycle through rain, through snow, through pain, delivering packages just to pay her fees. His hands cracked from the cold, his shoes tore apart, his body grew weaker every day, but his spirit remained strong because every night he would look at her sleeping peacefully and whisper to himself, "It is worth it." He would wake up before sunrise, cook her simple meals, leave her notes filled with love, and go out again into the harsh weather, carrying not just packages, but the weight of their future on his shoulders. There were nights when he returned home so exhausted that he could barely stand, yet he would still clean the room, wash her clothes, and make sure everything was ready for her next day, because he never wanted her to feel the struggle he was going through. His love was quiet, invisible, and powerful, the kind of love that sacrifices without asking for recognition. Years passed, and finally the day came when all the sacrifices seemed to pay off. Remy graduated at the top of her class, shining like a star, and Tunde stood in the crowd clapping harder than anyone, his tears running down his face, his heart filled with pride. "We did it," he whispered, believing that their love had conquered everything. But success has a way of changing people, slowly, silently, and sometimes permanently. Remy began to see the world differently, through new eyes, eyes that noticed things she once ignored. The way Tunde dressed, the way he spoke, the way he lived. The same man who once looked like her hero now started to look like someone she had outgrown, and that silent shift became the beginning of the end. She no longer waited for him at night, no longer smiled at his small efforts, and no longer saw the love behind his sacrifices. Then came Kofi, a confident, wealthy doctor who represented everything Tunde was not. He spoke with confidence, dressed with elegance, and moved in a world that Remy was slowly becoming part of. What started as simple conversations turned into laughter, then into late-night messages, and eventually into something that pushed Tunde further and further away. The man who once meant everything slowly became someone she was ashamed of, someone she started hiding instead of holding. One day, Tunde went to surprise her at the hospital, carrying food he had prepared with love, but instead of joy, he was met with embarrassment. "You shouldn't come here looking like this," she whispered sharply, glancing at her colleagues, afraid of what they might think. Tunde stood there, confused, hurt, holding the food like it no longer had meaning, and in that moment he realized something was changing, something he could not control. He walked out quietly, but inside his heart was screaming. Still he stayed, still he loved, still he believed she would come back to him, but the distance kept growing until it turned into a wall he could not break. Nights became silent, conversations became cold, and the love that once filled their home slowly disappeared. He began to feel like a stranger in his own life, like a man watching everything fall apart but unable to stop it. The final blow came on a freezing night when his bicycle broke after an accident, his body injured and exhausted, and when he finally reached home, hoping for warmth, for comfort, for love, he found the door locked and his life thrown out in bags. That moment broke him completely, leaving him alone in a world that suddenly felt empty and meaningless. That night, sitting alone at a broken bus stop, shivering and broken, Tunde felt like he had lost everything, like the world had forgotten him, until his fingers touched a small forgotten lottery ticket in his pocket. With nothing left to lose, he scratched it slowly, not expecting anything, but sometimes life changes in a single moment. 10 million. He stared at the numbers, unable to breathe, unable to think, and then suddenly he laughed, not because of the money, but because after all the pain, all the sacrifice, life had finally answered him. But even with that money, his heart was not immediately healed, because wealth can change your life, but it cannot erase your memories or the scars left behind by betrayal. Months passed, and Tunde began to rebuild himself, not just financially, but emotionally. He bought a simple home, not to show off, but to finally feel peace. He started helping others quietly, especially people who reminded him of his past, people who were struggling and unseen, because he knew what it felt like to be ignored by the world. He built something meaningful, something strong, something that reflected who he truly was. Meanwhile, Remy's world was falling apart. The man she chose left her, her career began to crumble, and the life she once chased started slipping out of her hands. The same people she tried to impress were no longer there when she needed them. The respect she thought she had built disappeared like smoke in the wind, leaving her alone with her choices. The day she walked into that luxury office hoping to beg for help, she never imagined what she would see. When the chair turned, her heart stopped. It was Tunde, the same man she had thrown out like trash, now sat before her, calm, powerful, untouchable. Tears filled her eyes as regret hit her like a storm. "I made a mistake. Please forgive me," she whispered. But Tunde looked at her with a calmness that hurt more than anger. "You didn't lose me because I was poor. You lost me because you forgot my value." He placed his old delivery jacket on the table, the symbol of everything she once disrespected, and added quietly, "A man is not measured by what he has, but by what he is willing to sacrifice." Remy broke down completely, realizing too late that she had lost something money could never replace. Her tears fell freely, but they could not change the past. Some mistakes cannot be undone, and some people, once lost, never return. Tunde stood up, turned away, and walked towards a new life where he was no longer defined by pain, rejection, or struggle. As he walked out of that office, he felt something he had not felt in years: freedom. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the past, but this time Tunde was no longer standing in it. He had walked through the storm and finally found his light.